Let's say goodbye with a smile, dear, just for a while, dear, we must part. Don't let this parting upset you, I'll not forget you.
I suppose it was a lust for adventure that I decided to investigate the possibility of joining the army. So anyway, two of us eventually plucked up courage and went off down to Parkston to see the local recruiting sergeant. He told us what a wonderful life it was, especially in the infantry, and I had made up my mind I wanted to go in the Royal Engineers. And when I told him I was 16, he said, you go outside and walk down the road and come back again and say you're 18 and you can join. And it so happened that on the 30th of January we both reported to Bournemouth, got our money, or I was sworn in, got our money, got our railway warrants on the train. And I left him in London, which was the first time I'd ever been to London, and it nearly frightened me stiff, I can tell you. I was really scared. And eventually I arrived at Chatham, and that's when the fright really came, because I got shouted at straight away for not walking in a forthright and upright manner. So anyway, we then had to go and be kitted out. Training went merrily on, or not so merrily sometimes, because extra drills, extra trench digging, extra rifle shooting. And eventually we were told that because obviously we didn't realise it, but because of the worsening political situation, that our training was now complete and that we were going to be posted, and of course everyone hoping to be posted near his home. When our posting came up, it revealed that the whole of the company were going to a place called Egypt. Around the end of July, I can't remember the exact date, we were put on the train, taken down to Southampton. The troopship Somersetshire was our vessel, the vessel on which we were being carted to Egypt. There were a couple of hundred or so well-wishers there, relatives and friends of chaps that were going abroad, half-heartedly singing Auld Lang Syne as the ship pulled away. And little did we know what we were in for, that we were going to be away for 5 solid years. On the 4th of August 1939, we passed through the Straits of Gibraltar and got a beautiful view of the Rock, and then pressed on into the Mediterranean and eventually came to Malta, where we pulled into Valletta harbour. The ship docked because there were some troops to get off there, and then we pushed on again, set sail, and eventually arrived at Port Said in Egypt. Off the troop ship, all carrying our kit bags and suitcases, and boarded a train to our first base in Cairo, which was at a place called Abbasia. And we stayed there for quite a while, then suddenly we were told that our presence was needed in the Western Desert. We set off again by train and drove for hours and hours, it seemed, until we arrived at a place which is called El Daba, which proved to be a little hut in a silver box and a few Bedouin tents right in the middle of nowhere. As we began to get near to El Daba, we realised that there was something wrong with the atmosphere, because it became very, very close, and then the wind got up, and eventually we had what is called a khamsin, which is a dust storm. It means that every particle of sand and dust that's around gets whipped into a fury and blown about. You get it in your eyes, your ears, your mouth, up your nose, in your kit bag, in your food. Oh, and it's a depressing experience. But we all now had to use for the first time our new mess tins, and they were all covered in a thin film of grease. And we were in the situation where there was no way to wash that off and nothing to wipe it off with. And so we had dinner, and we had a mug of tea in one of these tins, and the oil and grease that was on the potato was floating on the tea. But we were hungry, we were thirsty, and you shut your eyes and down it went. We stayed there, we did all sorts of drilling and engineering experiments to keep us occupied. And then suddenly, at, I think it was about 5 o'clock one morning, we were all summoned on parade, and our CEO told us that at last, after waiting there for so long, we had a place to go. Well, we were hopelessly short of transport for moving anywhere, and so they went down to the nearby Bedouin village where the local inhabitants had a small group of old, worn-out lorries. I don't know where they got them from, but they weren't much good, and they were all commandeered, complete with the drivers, drove up to the camp, and we were all loaded in them, and we all set off down the one single road that led from Eldava to a place called Alexandria. And I remember this trip because on the way all of these civilian lorries kept running out of oil, and we had one of our small trucks continually going up and down the column, filling these old civilian lorries up with oil. About 200 of us, I think, set off in trucks again, not knowing where we were going. We were taken into Alexandria docks and put on board a ship, which appeared to be a filthy old coal-carrying ship because there was coal dust everywhere. Next morning we woke up, we were somewhere at sea, and it was then that the commanding officer told us, he said that from now on we're going to be now not as soldiers but as civilians. And all our army kit and our rifles had to be all packed up and put at the bottom of the ship and covered over. So they dished out, they had just 200 of us, there were just 200 suits and 200 pairs of shoes and so on, and of course not everybody got the kind of thing that fitted them. So we kept going, and we were now told that we were going on a civilian mission to Turkey. And after several days steaming through the Mediterranean, past the island of Crete, which we found out afterwards, and the Dodecanese Islands, we came up into Gallipoli and pulled into dock near a place called Çanakkale. We did do a few small military installations whilst we were there. We built some tank landing piers on the edge of the Dardanelles. We also installed a Deckerville, that's a small railway track system up into the hills, and finally it must have been decided that our presence wasn't really needed there. And so we packed up again and back on the ship, and we had to run the gauntlet of Italian bombing raids through the Mediterranean. We were bombarded every day, and planes coming over, and this was my first real experience of war. You could see the bombs leaving the ship and leaving the aircraft and coming down, hitting the water. And it was a real frightening experience. After about 3 or 4 days of that, we arrived back in Egypt and docked again in Alexandria. Much to our disgust, there wasn't any hope of going to England, and we stayed there for a couple of days and then were sent back to Cairo again. This time we didn't stay very long in Cairo. We were quickly put on trains and sent back into the Western Desert, this time beyond Eldava, where we'd been the first time, to a place called Merz Matruh. And we were set about building fortifications around Merz Matruh, making machine gun posts, concrete pillboxes, laying landmines. Then it was on one of these particular missions that about 50 Italian bombers came over and started dropping the bombs. We had, I suppose, almost a quarter of a mile to run to the nearest cover, which was an anti-tank ditch. And so as we ran towards these, the bombs were dropping all around us, and I remember vivid red bits of metal flashing past and horrific explosions. We ran, and I think we must have jumped around 20 yards into this ditch. Horror of horrors, we landed right in the spot where there was a big stack of these anti-tank mines, all loaded with jelly. But if a bomb had dropped anywhere near that, then that would have been good night.
Some sunny day.